My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. This is the Long Island Report. This is the weekly show that I chair and co-host with Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of Suffolk County. Unfortunately, Jesse's under the weather today, so I'll be doing the show, but I have some very good help with me. Along with me is my former boss, my very good friend, my blood brother, Speaker Peter F. Vallone, Sr., who is Speaker of the City Council. Peter, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Judge Weinberg, and it's always great to hear from you.
Well, I will tell you, and I'll tell the audience, you are truly one of the city's and the state's heroes. People do not remember the bad old days, and which is why we have the crisis in crime today, because those, as Santayana said, who forget history are doomed to repeat it. It was your leadership that brought the Safe Street, Safe City program to New York and gave Rudy Giuliani, the mayor, the army, and all the support staff necessary to protect and defend and save the city. And you and I were on the Bernie and Sid show earlier today, and we were talking about how important it is to have a safe city. I want your thoughts on that, and then we'll talk about Columbus Day. Let's talk about...
It's pretty obvious to everyone who understands how important law and order is. Nothing else is going to work. The schools are not going to work. Transportation is not going to work. Anything you can think of is not going to work unless you can control law and order. You can't let gangsters rule. You can't let crime prevail. People have to feel safe. Now, back when, Richard, and nobody knows better than you, back in the 70s, the way the things were, we definitely had to have a return to where people can feel safe. It was so bad at the time, Richard, that before I became Speaker, we had to keep the doors locked at night, and we had to make sure that we didn't travel at night. We had to be very careful because there were no cops. We were down over 20,000 cops back in the early 70s, which was absolutely outrageous.
And that continued up until and through the time when David Dinkins became mayor in '89. So,
thank you. Yes, I was about to say that it took a lot of people to help. David Dinkins was a great help to the city council at the time, which was just at the beginning of the fact that the city council was finally going to become a legislative body as it was designed to be. Up until that time, the city was ruled by the Board of Estimate. That was basically the 5 borough presidents. They cared about what was going on in their borough, but they were more interested in financial rewards in the sense of creating more jobs than they were making things safe. And when the Supreme Court of the United States finally decided that under one person, one rule, the city council had to have the power of the budget. And it was at that time, when David Dinkins was mayor, just as it took place, that he and I worked together because I reminded him he was a good friend and everybody else, but he had to understand that the city council members were the ones who were living in the districts and knew whether or not crime was prevailing or not. And while he was the mayor and he had a responsibility to balance the budget, up until that time, the fact of the matter was the city council could not move money. And I explained to him at the time, and you were also there as my counsel, Richard. I explained to him at the time that the council was going to immediately start rehiring cops, starting with 6,000. And we were going to do it whether or not the mayor liked it, because we never had the council to do it. He understood how important safety was, so we worked together, and he was responsible for helping us get the state legislature in line, because the state legislature at the time believed, contrary to what was going on in the city, that the minority caucus up there felt that we had to straighten out the cops too, to make sure that they did not take advantage of anybody because of their color or creed. Of course, we believed in that wholeheartedly, and we worked together to make sure that every district got enough cops to maintain the kind of law and order that was necessary just for people to live in pace, in safety. And we did that. With the mayor's cooperation, we got the state legislature on board to help us not simply raise the real estate taxes in the city, but also to get a small income tax, which we dedicated only to the law and order, and reestablishing the fact that we could not fire cops, and we had to rehire cops. I mean, we could fire cops, obviously, if they did something wrong. But we had to make sure that we maintained a police force minimum of, at the time, 36,000. From the 20,000 up to 36,000, then eventually up to 42,000.
Well, that's exactly right. With me on the phone is my guest and my former boss, Speaker Peter Vallone, Senior, the Speaker of the City Council. Peter was a brilliant lawyer, a wonderful client, is one of my closest friends in this world. And we're going back and we're talking about the origins of the Safe Street, Safe City program, which is the device created by the City Council under Peter Vallone's leadership that saved the city, because we worked with Mayor Dinkins, we worked with the state legislature, we worked with the governor, and when Rudy Giuliani, and we talked about this earlier, when Rudy Giuliani came in, he had the army there to do the job, and he knew exactly what to do to restore safety to the city of New York. And the problem, Peter, today is we don't have a city council that understands this. We don't have a state assembly that understands this. We don't have a state senate who understands this. And in my opinion, I'm not speaking for you, we don't have a governor who's exercising the leadership to push through what's necessary to protect New York City and New York State.
Right, and what Mayor Giuliani brought on board, we gave them the cops, right? And
social workers and drug counselors and court staff and legal aid lawyers and more DAs. We gave them what they needed.
Wanted in every school, and I absolutely agree with him. An additional part of that sum should go to making sure that not only the cities are safe, but also that they would understand how important it was, and we would have special programs in every school about the dangers of using drugs and marijuana and heroin and things of that nature, and that was a big help. But what Mayor Giuliani did up until that time, that we did not have the kind of control over the police force that we now have, he established accountability, not only for every police commander, police precinct, but for every cop. Every cop had to account for what he or she was doing during that day. And when there were too many cars being stolen, that, like, for instance, in Astoria, right by the Triborough Bridge, it was like a feast day for people stealing cars and going back over the Triborough Bridge and going back to wherever they came from. And we had to stop that. In every district, in other districts, the problem was narcotics, or we would get something but the accountability, Mayor Giuliani was like a police commissioner, an additional police commissioner, because he went to every precinct in the city to find out what was going on in that district, what was going on in Astoria, what was going on in Forest Hills, what was going on in Brooklyn, what was going on in Manhattan, where was the need, and what were they doing about it? And that was something. They started as you remember, what was called CompStat, where they had on computers everything that was going on. And when a police precinct commander wasn't doing his job, he or she knew that was going to be the end of their career. So everybody was on the ball, not just the city council and the legislatures and everybody else that was involved with it, but every cop wanted to make sure that his or her district and his or her precinct was doing the job properly. And it was great. That means, and of course, it wasn't just me, Richard, and it wasn't just you. We had to get help from legislators. We had to get help from the president. At one time, we had to go to Washington together to talk to President Clinton at the time to make sure he, too, understood how important it was that the city balance its budget. And he helped us very considerably in making sure that we did balance our budget and making sure that we got the federal funds that were necessary together with the state funds that were necessary to implement our dream.
Peter, I want to switch gears. I just got the signal from the studio producer that we only have a few minutes left. I want to focus your attention, if I can, to the Columbus Day.
Absolutely.
And I once again to our audience, I'm on the phone with Speaker Peter Vallone, the greatest speaker of the New York City Council, the one who helped save the city, and a great Italian American as we approach Columbus Day. Peter, you have a bill up in Albany that wants to abolish the name Columbus Day. They want to replace it with indigenous people. You have people who want to strike Columbus's name from our history books. You want to have the statues taken down. What do you think about all this stuff, Peter?
No problem with indigenous people celebrating what anybody's celebrating. It isn't just because Columbus was Italian, but he was the greatest explorer of the time. Everybody believed, or anybody in positions of leadership believed, that the world was round, not round, but it was square, and that they were going to fall off the end of the earth as soon as they traveled beyond a certain distance. Columbus had to prove, not only to him, but also the king and queen of Spain at the time, that gave him the ship and the money necessary to follow it, that these settlers were going to live, and they were going to fall off the end of the earth. And Columbus was crazy, according to the people at the time. He had to have the faith of people who knew better to give him the ships that were necessary, the crew that was necessary to go sailing. Now, they didn't know how far they were going to go. They didn't know, God forbid, they were going to fall off. But they finally found land.
Yeah, and Peter, so let's just focus with a couple of minutes to go. Tell me, what do you think about this banning of history, changing the names, knocking down statues? What do you think about that?
How stupid can you be to actually change history? Do you really think that history is something that you could now simply change because you don't like it, or because you think that somebody else or someone else should be celebrated? How nonsensical. You can't change the fact who our first presidents were. You can't change the fact of any portion of history, whether it was Greece or Rome or anything else. I have no problem with indigenous people celebrating. I have no problem with anybody celebrating. But I have a huge problem with taking a statue of Columbus down, one of the greatest people that ever lived at the time, of the greatest explorer, certainly, that ever lived in the 15th century. So why in the world would you be so stupid as to say, no, he didn't do anything? We, the indigenous people, did it all. What are you talking about? The indigenous people were there. He loved them. He consecrated the ground that he stood on to God, who was all-seeing and all-loving, not a God of hatred as some people think today. There's no room for hatred anywhere. Without love, you cannot succeed. Columbus loved what he was doing. He loved the people when he landed. And how could people of hatred now say, take it down, because whatever he did, we don't like. We like somebody better. But if that isn't stupid, I don't know what is.
Well, Peter, you used an important word, and the word is love. And I want to conclude this first segment, ladies and gentlemen, of the Long Island Report with my good friend, my former boss, Speaker Peter Vallone of the City Council, by telling you, Peter, I love you. I always have. I always will. Of all the people I've ever known in this life, you really are the best person I've ever known. And the city of New York and the state of New York, we're very fortunate to have your leadership at a time of crisis. People forget that we almost lost the city, but it was saved. And it's because of your work with Mayors Dinkins and Giuliani that saved the city of New York. And I only hope and pray, and you're the religious one of the two of us, Peter, but I only hope and pray that the leadership of the state legislature, this mayor today, this governor today, and the leaders of this city council wake up and take on the task of protecting and defending the state of New York and the city of New York. Speaker Peter.
Thanks a lot of people, Richard, and I want to thank you as being the greatest lawyer I've ever met. We're working at my side throughout the whole thing. It isn't just one person that makes a difference. It's a lot of people who have the same ideas and the same love of this city and of this country. Where would the world be without the free country that we're in today?
Greatest country ever was or ever will be, Peter.
Exactly. And to people like Columbus and everyone else that had anything to do with not just law and order, but understanding that anyone and anybody and anything, you could find a common ground. There is no reason to hate. There's too much hatred in this country right now, in the state legislature, in the Congress, and every place else. We work together with Republicans and Democrats. You remember that, Richard?
Absolutely.
We couldn't accomplish it without everybody and every party understanding how important it was simply to make the city safe. And how important it is now for everyone to understand, don't allow history to be changed because you don't like it for some reason. It isn't a question of like. It's a question of keeping the truth going.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much. God bless you. God bless our great city and our great state and our great country. And you and I are scheduled to have lunch in a couple of weeks, and I look forward to it. Be well and be safe. Thank you again.
How about Judge?
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. Unfortunately, my good friend and co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, is under the weather today. We all hope that he has a quick recovery, and we look forward to having him back next week. We're very fortunate indeed to have my former boss, my number one client, Speaker Peter Vallone of the City Council, who helped save this city back in the bad days that now seem to be back upon us, where there was no law and order, there was no public safety, people were fleeing the city. Peter Vallone's leadership led to a program called Safe Streets, Safe City. It restored public safety to the city, and we became the greatest and most safe big city in America. And in large measure, that's because of Peter Vallone's leadership and the help of Mayor Dinkins and Mayor Giuliani. It was a great program. It was very successful. And I would only hope that the leaders of the legislature, the city council, our current mayor who's trying, and our governor who has to focus on this issue will wake up and do what's necessary to protect and defend the city and the state. Let me switch gears now. As Peter and I were discussing, Columbus Day is coming up. It's a very important holiday. We have to avoid this cancer of political correctness. It's a very dangerous thing to have political correctness. It's suppressing free thought and free speech. Columbus Day is an important holiday. They want to rename it Indigenous Peoples Day. It's Columbus Day. They want to have a separate day for Indigenous people. That's fine with me, but I believe it's very important that we recognize the historical heritage of this country. You cannot wipe it off the history books. That is mind control, that's thought control, that's speech control. If you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it. George Orwell in 1984 talked about the nightmare of this kind of censorship. We have to wake up and we have to stop it now, because otherwise our children, our grandchildren will have no idea about the lessons of history. Now, I want to ask this question. Do New York State really want to become California? So I'll answer the question by saying, let's see what's going on in California. We know people are fleeing. We know that they've lost congressional seats because of the loss of population. We know that the homeless and the drug addicted and the migrant flood is coming to California. Cities have lost control of their streets. The homeless population, the drug peddlers, and the drug users are all over. San Francisco, L.A., they have a weak-kneed L.A. district attorney. They just recently replaced the DA in San Francisco. Hopefully she's running for re-election in November. She'll win. But the crisis of lawlessness in the cities of California is enormous and has to be done. Then you have the problem in California of the Green New Deal. Now, everybody's for a safe climate, but what we're doing in this obsession, this secular religion they've created of climate change, is they're causing a crisis of energy. Simply stated, there is not enough solar, there is not enough wind to keep the engines of civilization, of society going. If you don't have energy, everything falls apart. There's no food, there's no shelter, there's no transportation. The hospitals can't run. You need energy. Cars can't move. Electric cars need to have charging stations. You need to have charging stations all over. You need to have lithium and cobalt to keep batteries going. That comes from China, who's an arch enemy of the United States. This is a serious problem. They're talking about stopping in New York State and California and 17 other states the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035. Well, that's a dream. It's never going to happen. Newsom, who's the governor of California, went out and he announced that 2035 is going to be the drop-dead date, and they're going to have staging of this, that no more sales of gas cars. The problem is electric cars won't work. Dr. Peter Miklos, who's a resident genius, often appearing on the Cats at Night show, where I'm on virtually every night with John Catsimatidis, has pointed out the dangers of electric cars. For example, if there's a flood, the cars are ruined by salt. If there's an accident, it's prone to have people electrocuted in the car and for the rescuers, the EMS people. It's a very serious problem. If you're sitting in an electric car all day, you're in what Dr. Miklos calls a Faraday machine. You're exposed to electric and the radiation and all the bad things that go with it. And it's more expensive. And we don't have the raw materials. And they put these mandates in without talking to the people who understand. You want to have a goal of getting rid of fossil fuel because fossil fuel is a danger? Okay. But if the United States unilaterally went into the business of abolishing all fossil fuel in the United States and made us totally energy dependent on enemy powers, that is Venezuela, that is Russia, that is Saudi Arabia, the OPEC countries. If we were dependent on them, skyrocketing inflation, they can charge whatever they want. It's a national security threat. We couldn't mobilize our armed forces to protect us. They could shake us down constantly. If you don't have a strong economy, you don't have a strong country, and it's vulnerable to challenges and attack. But there's always a consequence from every action, and we have to look at the law of unintended consequences. It feels good to say we're for green energy, but at what cost? Higher inflation, national security threat, and not workable. And that's the leadership of California and the Green New Dealers, and that's what they're fostering on other states. And New York has bought into that, and it's a terrible danger. And electric cars are dangerous. Next. They just passed a law signed by Governor Newsom in California that says that doctors who give out, quote, disinformation will be penalized by the medical boards and they could lose their licenses. Now, that raises an interesting question, ladies and gentlemen. What does it mean to say that doctors propounding disinformation? Well, let's take a look at Dr. Fauci. At the beginning, he said masks didn't work. Then he said masks did work. Then he said the vaccine would keep us safe from catching it. Well, it's all turned out that he changed his story on a regular basis and he wasn't telling the whole truth, or he didn't know the whole truth. The whole history of science throughout time is the ability to challenge conventional wisdom. Without the ability of scientists and medical professionals to challenge conventional wisdom, you will never have progress in science, in medicine. And it's very, very important to understand that. So when you penalize somebody from saying, well, wait a minute, the vaccine may protect me from going to the hospital and going on to equipment and machinery to keep me alive, but it doesn't protect my spouse because I may be able to spread that. Is that disinformation, or is that raising an important question? Or, as now turns out, it doesn't protect. And that's a real problem. So in their foolishness, the state of California, the legislature, backed by the governor, have now passed this law, which makes us think about what's going on. The suppression of free thought and creativity and progress in the medical community. Is that a good idea? That's what's happening in California. Now, you can say whatever you want about this new thing about transgenderism and about whether kids should have these operations that are life-changing operations to change their sex. But as a parent and as a grandparent, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that's a real problem because it may be the whim of the moment. It may be peer pressure. They may be going along with doing this. Does it make sense to exclude parents from talking to their children about what the dangers are and making them slow down before this happens, before they submit to this body-altering surgery that could destroy their physical lives and their mental health? And what the state of California said is that we're a transgender safe zone, that you don't need parental knowledge or consent before you can come to California to have one of these operations. So if you have a state like the state of New York that says, no, I want parental consent before a medical procedure can be done on my minor child, California says they will not recognize that. Now, how dare they say they will not recognize that? Because under the federal Constitution, the New York law is entitled to full faith and credit. The California law has no right to supersede a New York law or a Virginia law or a North Carolina law or a Texas law or a Wisconsin law that says parents have a right to talk to their children, have knowledge of an operation, give consent to it. Another brilliant change brought to you by the state legislature and the governor of California. Now, what does it mean to say that California is in the leadership? Well, Gavin Newsom has this great idea that he's going to run for president if Biden doesn't. Well, I'm a common sense Democrat, and I've met Gavin Newsom. In fact, when I was on the bench, Gavin spent about 4 hours with me when I was running the Midtown Community Court. And I have to tell you about Gavin Newsom. Charming, urbane, eloquent, articulate, smart, charismatic, all of the above. But when he gets carried away by this left-wing ideology to push through all of these bad ideas and support all these bad ideas I've been talking about in this segment, then what do you have? And if then the California then becomes the ideological leadership of the country about where we should be going, we're only going to have a weakened United States, an unlivable United States, civilization at risk, quality of life diminished for all. We have to think very hard about who the leaders of this country should be. I've said on this show before, and I'll say it again, I think we need a change. Biden is tired. He's old. He's not running this country effectively. One thing after another that he's done has been, in my opinion, a disaster. Trump, while I think that he was right on a lot of his public policies and a lot of decisions, does not have the ability to unite us. We're a country that's divided. We need to bring back common shared values and unity. We do not have common shared values and unity. We will have a weakened country, and our enemies will take us out. Sun Tzu, the great Chinese philosopher and general, understood that the way to win a war is to undermine it from the inside, and then the country that's the target wakes up one day and they've already lost before a bullet is fired, before a sword is drawn. And that's the danger. We are now in the process of weakening this great country, and I say we have to wake up. We need leadership of courage, of vision. We have to have people who unite us. The need for national unity is now more important than ever. We are facing an axis of evil. That is Russia, that is China, that is Iran, that is Venezuela. And I'll talk more about the Venezuela connection in our next segment. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. I'm going solo today because, unfortunately, my good friend and esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, is out. He has a bug. Hopefully Jesse will be back on his feet well and raring to go for next week's show. At the beginning of the show, we had Speaker Peter Vallone, the former Speaker of the City Council, who led the charge to keep New York City safe during the bad old days of the late 1970s and the 80s and into the 90s. He was a great man. He's a good friend. He's a beloved friend. And he's the one working with Mayor Dinkins and Mayor Giuliani and with the governor and the state legislature and the city council who came up with Safe Streets, Safe City. And as a result of that, we had the cops on the street. We had the social workers. We had the drug counselors. We had more legal aid lawyers. We had more prosecutors. We had more corrections officers. We had more interpreters. We had what we needed to keep the city safe. I can only hope and pray we'll go back with the leadership of this city council, this mayor, this governor, this legislature to get us back on the right track. Because right now we're going in the wrong direction. We need people like Speaker Peter Vallone at the forefront. So I've talked about Columbus Day. I've talked about safe streets. And we've talked about the danger of New York State becoming like California with all that's wrong about it. The next thing I want to raise is, just for a moment or two, you had a hurricane, and for the most part, the political leadership of Florida and of other states did this in a nonpartisan, bipartisan way. They didn't politicize the event. Then we have the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, going out there and saying that hurricane relief should be given out based on, quote, equity, E-Q-I-T-Y, equity. And what is equity to her is that racial minorities, communities of color, should be the first ones to get relief. If that's not a violation of federal and state constitutional law, I don't know what it is. If that's not something that will divide all of us based on race, I don't know what will. I think it's time for Kamala Harris to have a history lesson and read the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King said that we should be judged by the content of our character and not by the color of our skin. And we should not be apportioning rights and benefits to people based on the color of their skin. One of the great cancers of our kind is wokeism. Another cancer of our time is identity politics. We should be focusing on giving a fair share and an equal opportunity to all and not carving up based on race. Do you really want to have somebody, God forbid, if you need cancer surgery, somebody who got into medical school because there was an apportionment based on people's race as opposed to who the best doctors were? If you're on trial in a court, do you really want your lawyer to be the one who got into law school based on his or her race or sexual identity as opposed to their ability? I think the answers are obvious. Kamala Harris, you got there in that position because Joe Biden promised he's going to have a woman of color as his candidate for vice president. And you're a perfect example of the failure of identity politics in getting us the best and the brightest. Kamala Harris, you never should have been the vice president of the United States. You should not be one heartbeat away from the presidency of the United States. You're simply not qualified. And anybody doubts that, listen to what she says about everything. She's not capable of coherent discussion or sentencing. She's supposed to look at the border and be the border czar. Hundreds of thousands and millions of people are flowing through the border. We're not safe. The country is under attack from this flood of immigrants. There's the lawlessness going on. They're breaking the law by coming in. They're being shipped around by the Biden administration all around the country in the middle of the night, and they're still doing that throughout the cities. They're doing this. And when Abbott, the governor of Texas, and DeSantis, the governor of Florida, to have symbolism of shipping them to Democratic cities to show what the real cost of this is, they're accusing them now of racism. I mean, have you ever heard anything more ridiculous? It's not racism. It's trying to show you the problem that you have to be prepared when you bring in immigration, and you cannot have millions of people coming in. You don't know who they are. You don't know if they're medically fit to come in, what diseases they're carrying. You don't know if they're members of cartels. You don't know if they're terrorists. They've already caught at least close to 90 people who are on terrorist lists coming through the border. Cartels are coming in. Fentanyl is flooding this country. We've lost somewhere between 140,000 and 200,000 people because the fentanyl crisis is coming through the border. China is making it, and the cartels are shipping into the country, and it's coming in through open borders. Mr. President, you took an oath of office. Your oath of office was to protect and defend this country and to enforce its laws. You're failing to do this, and the country is paying an awful price. So do not fault Abbott. Do not fault DeSantis. Do not play the blame game. The blame begins and ends with open borders and the failure to protect and defend this country. The failure lies with the Biden administration and its failure to enforce the immigration laws. Remain in Mexico was a Trump program. You don't like Trump? Okay, I get it. He has an unfortunate personality, but he was right. You have to protect the border. Without a border, you have no national security. You have no country. Next, Biden is now having shut down American energy independence by stopping the flow of oil, stopping the permitting, stopping any development. You know, when you need a refinery, it takes years to build a refinery, and it takes billions of dollars to build it, and you can't replace them quickly. And the number of refineries have gone down dramatically. Will probably in the last 20 years cost us about a third to 40% of the active refineries. Nobody's building refineries. We're energy dependent on our enemies. We have oil, the oil we need. We can get it from Canada. We have it in Alaska. We have it in Pennsylvania with shale. New York State can provide shale. We can be energy independent, open up the pipelines, open up the spigots. That will beat back inflation. Inflation is the hidden tax that hurts Americans of all stages, but more particularly and more especially, it's the poor and the middle class who pay the price of inflation. People's pensions, people's IRAs, people's deferred comps have gone down way over 20% since Biden took over with his policies that are inflationary policies. All these bills he's passed are inflationary. He has a bill he passes called the Inflation Reduction Act. That's absurd. It's not inflation reduction, it's inflation increasing. And they pumped in a lot of money, forgive the expression, into Green New Deal, which will not help inflation and will not help get us energy independent. And so what does he do? He goes to Saudi Arabia and he begs for money. I'm sorry, strike that. He begs for oil. And the Saudis play with him, and now they're cutting down production through OPEC and Russia, 2 million barrels a day. That means the price of oil will soon be hitting $100 a day very quickly. So what does Biden do? He does two things. He goes into our strategic energy supplies and he reduces that. You're not supposed to use the strategic energy supplies for political purpose because you have an election, Joe Biden, coming up in November, and you think it may help a little bit for a couple of days on inflation. The fact of the matter is it doesn't help, and you deplete the energy reserves. When we have to buy it back, it'll cost you more money at $100 or $120 oil, and it's a national security threat if you don't have the energy, because if you don't have the energy, everything shuts down. So, having failed on getting the Saudis to give us oil, what does he do? He now wants to do business with the dictator, the communist dictator of Venezuela, and he's cutting deals with him to buy oil. Has he forgotten that the people of Venezuela want the communists out? They want freedom. They want a democracy. They want a leader who does not terrorize them with his army and his police force. Has he forgotten that? What is wrong with understanding that the Venezuela dictator has to go and we should not be giving him money to bolster his regime? Similarly, Biden is still talking about doing a deal with Iran. If he does a deal with Iran, let's get this straight. Iran will use that money to give to the terrorists. That's what he did before. And he destabilizes the Middle East. It's not just Israel. It's all of the peace-loving states of the Middle East. It's United Arab Emirates. It's Jordan. It's Egypt. It's Saudi Arabia. They're all under threat of Iran. You give them the money, they build up their armaments. They keep fighting for and pushing for nuclear weapons. The only thing the nuclear deal does is give them the money to do this. And you never get a real commitment with real inspection and real control about them getting a nuclear weapon. And Kerry, who was the Secretary of State who fostered this ridiculous deal on us along with Obama, what has happened there? They still went forward and developed it, and they kept the inspectors out. So if you're going to do this again, I mean, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. Iran is dedicated to the destruction of the United States of America and the people and the countries it perceives to be its enemies. It's a dangerous pariah state. It has to be checked, and you cannot have an Iran deal. Next. Putin's failed invasion. Well, we have a real problem, and this is the problem. Putin launched a war in February. We're now in the 6th or 7th month of that war, and the Ukrainian people, with their courage and the leadership of their president, Zelensky, has fought back, and they're successful. They're taking back territory. They're taking it back strategic territories, not just peripheral territories. They're pushing the Russian army and the mercenaries back, and that's very important. And he's losing face, and he's now calling up the reserves, and hundreds of thousands of reservists are being called up, and guess what they're doing? People are learning that they're being called up, and they're fleeing. Russians are fleeing the country of Russia to get out because they don't want to come in and fight a futile and dangerous war and lose their lives for Putin's narcissistic ambitions. Putin wants domination over his area of the world. He won't be happy until he resurrects the Soviet Empire, the great Russian Empire, and he's going to feed as many people and cannon fodder as he can to get that result. This is dangerous. This is awful. He's a cornered rat. And what is he going to do? He rattles the nuclear saber again. He says, I've just annexed that territory of these 4 provinces, these 4 areas, and they're now Russian territory. If you come in there, that's an act of war against Russia, and I have the right to use nuclear weapons because you're attacking Russia. Well, first of all, it's an illegal act. It was a war for confiscation of somebody else's territory and geography. It is not Russian territory. It's an illegal act. The United Nations has recognized this. All freedom-loving people have recognized this. We do not have a situation that's safe. If he uses nuclear war efforts, we may be on the cusp of one of the most dangerous situations since the Cuban missile crisis. Kevin has just given me a signal. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. This is the Long Island Report. We'll be back in a moment for the fourth and final segment of this week's show.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is Judge Richard Weinberg. We're back for the fourth and final segment of the Long Island Report. My co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, is out today. He has a bug. Hopefully he'll have a quick recovery and be back with me next week. Jesse, if you're listening, I want you back. This is a tough road to hoe all by myself. I need you, and I want you back as soon as possible. So going into the final segment, let me tell you what concerns me now. The Supreme Court of the United States has just reopened, and they have a lot of very important cases that they're going to be dealing with in this new term. But the important thing about the Supreme Court of the United States, it's the law of the land. It's the final voice about what is constitutional and not constitutional. It is not a political party. It is not an ideological party. It is not for the Democrats. It is not for the Republicans. It's for a constitutional order. It's judicial review to make sure we have a constitutional republic. And this is very, very important to understand. A constitutional republic has to be protected and defended. Now, there's a debate going on with Justice Kagan and Justice Alito. And what's the debate? Kagan says that there's a challenge to the legitimacy of the court. Well, if there's a challenge to the legitimacy of the court, it's coming from the left wing, who's saying that courts are political bodies, and if you don't like their decisions, then you have to change the court. You have to pack the court. You have to increase the numbers of the court. You're expecting a political result rather than a law result, an ideological result rather than a constitutional result. And this is dangerous. If there's an attack the legitimacy of the Supreme Court of the United States, it's because the left wing does not control the Supreme Court of the United States and is not getting its way. So like a spoiled child, it's grabbing its ball and it's going off the playing field and saying, oh, this is no good, this is no good, crying all the way because they will not get the answer. The important thing that we all have to remember, that the commitment to a constitutional system is more important than the victory on any particular issue. I'll say that again. The commitment to a constitutional republic and constitutional order is more important than the victory on any particular issue. And what do they use as a charge against the so-called legitimacy or illegitimacy of the Supreme Court of the United States? Let me tell you what it is. It's a case called Dodd, which set aside Roe versus Wade. I've said this on the program before, and I will tell you again. Roe versus Wade was an unconstitutional decision. There was no authority for it. The Supreme Court at the time made it up. The Supreme Court made it up. There's no constitutional basis for it at all. And they said so in the most recent decision, Dodd. But it did not abolish the right of abortion. Let me say that again. It did not abolish the right of abortion. What it did was saying it's up to the state governments to decide whether they'll allow abortion under what terms and conditions. So there's plenty of places in this country where a person can get an abortion. It was not outlawed. Supreme Court did not outlaw it. And the left wing and people on the Supreme Court who should know better should stop attacking the legitimacy of the court. Because if they attack the legitimacy of the court, it's the last bastion of freedom of our constitutional republic. Now, the Supreme Court's going to have some interesting cases coming up this year. You're going to have cases involving the power of the state legislatures, which is granted the power to elect, to decide what the rules of the game are for state elections. Okay? Remember that. The Constitution of the United States says that the state legislatures decide what the rules are, not the secretaries of state, not the secretaries of state, not the state courts, but the state legislature, and that was violated in the last presidential election of 2020. So you have cases coming up to the Supreme Court of the United States on that. You have cases going to the Supreme Court talking about religious liberty and whether an owner of a business has a right to do business or not do business with whomever they choose. And there is a question about, can you force upon people when it's against their religion to do business with people who have different views, for example, on same-sex marriage or transgenderism. That's going to be a big case. Then you have the issue of immigration law. That's going to be there, and about what the federal government can do by executive order with respect to the immigration law as opposed to needing legislative solutions. And then finally, you're going to have the issue of using race as a basis for college admissions, the so-called affirmative action case. And that's going to be a very big case. We have to pay attention to that because they're really going to have a system where people get in to colleges based on the color of their skin rather than their abilities and their track records. So those 4 cases are going to be before the Supreme Court of the United States. And we should be paying attention to that as time goes on during the course of this year and next year. Now, I believe, as I said earlier, that Biden has made a big mistake about Venezuela. We cannot trade with Venezuela, but we have to do something more. We have to get back to protecting and defending the border because this is a real danger to the stability and safety of the United States. And we have to do it now because the crisis is only worsening. And that's the danger from the outside. But what's the danger from the inside? Danger from the inside is criminality, the culture of lawlessness that's going on in the cities of the United States. You have these policies, no cash bail, raising the age, mandatory releases from prisons, mandatory releases from parole, abolishing qualified immunity for police, no pressing on diaphragm laws, opening up the personnel records of police officers, opening up files for open discovery in a time frame that they cannot protect witnesses and complainants. All of these kinds of laws are making our cities and our country less safe. The first obligation of government is to protect and defend the people. If the people are not protected and defended, you will have no civilization. If there's no public safety, everything goes. Look at what's going on. You see them going into stores, dozens of people, and pirating everything. You see people pushing other people in front of subway trains. You see people randomly punching other people out, stabbing other people on the street. And this is stranger attacks. You find there's no such thing as a safe neighborhood. These are dangerous cancers that have to be stopped. You have to have law and order. Without law and order, there's no public safety. Without public safety, there's no civilization. The legislatures and the governors and the mayors have to wake up. Stop attacking the police. Protect the police because they protect us. Change the laws and change it now. Stop the nonsense about statistics. The statistics are clear in the city of New York, for example, that crime is up. Rapes, robberies, grand larceny, burglaries, auto theft. It's all up. Shootings up. You need to protect the people or you will lose our great country. Now, related to that is the mentally ill. You have the mentally ill roaming the street. They need medication. They need treatment. Some have to be kept in until they can be handled, and the city's innocent people are safe. You are not safe when you have hundreds and thousands of people roaming the cities and the states who are dangerous. Look at all the random violence, the unprovoked violence, stranger to stranger, that's coming from the mentally ill. We have to rethink our mental health laws. We have to have the ability of society to bring them in, to give them the medications, to test their mental capacity and their danger, and to give them treatment. We need more hospital beds for the mentally ill, more facilities, more drug treatment centers in the hospitals. The linkage between mental illness and drug addiction is enormous. Anyone who knows anything about criminality and homelessness and drug addiction, they're all linked together. You cannot parse them out, separate them. The problem is you have a bunch of children in the state legislatures on the extreme left. They pass this feel-good legislation, let everybody out. When you let everybody out who's dangerous, whether they're criminals or the violent, mentally ill, who pays the price? It's your wife, it's your parent, it's your child, it's you. There are no safe places because you never know when the random violence will come out of a darkened alley or at 12:30 on a corner across the street from Central Park in a beautiful sunny day where visitors from the South, from Nashville, are there about to cross the street and somebody comes out and punches the kid in the face. The kid goes down. Now, what would happen if the kid hit his head on the pavement and he went brain dead? Massive brain damage. You have loss of life because that person should not be on the street. If he's a criminal, he should be in jail. If he's mentally ill, he should be put in treatment hospitals. And that's what we have to do. I'll follow my last comment about the dangers going on now. For some reason, they passed something called congestion pricing. It's a bad idea. It will cause more congestion. It will not protect the environment. It will destroy the economy of the city of New York. It will be a tax on commuters. More congestion, more pollution, a tax, destroy the economy of the city. Why are we pushing congestion pricing? I am saying to this Governor Hochul and to this legislature, change that law while you can. The damage from COVID and criminality is bad enough. You don't have more than 40% of commercial occupancy in New York City. People are commuting and they're afraid to ride the subways. Don't tell me the money will go to the subways. MTA, do a better job of managing your money and enforce the fare beating laws if you want people on the subway. But first, you have to make people assured and confident that subways are safe. Congestion pricing, a bad idea. It needs to be stopped. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off on behalf of Chairman Jesse Garcia, who will be back with us next week. The Long Island Report. Thank you for listening. I hope you and your families are safe and well.